9:04. So I'd like to call this meeting, the special meeting of the Surgeon Waterbrook Finance Administration Committee to order. Special counsel, please call the roll.
Director Sloss,
I'm here.
Director Howard,
Here.
Director Pacho, Director Guzman,
Here.
Director Markowitz. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay, we are now going to proceed to our presentation items, and that is our draft budget for fiscal year 2024, which is nicely done, I might add.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for the opportunity to present our fiscal 24 budget. This is obviously a critical process in our planning, and I want to give thanks to the budget director, the whole team, our consultants. PFM worked with us on this deck, and Raf Tillis worked with us on revenue projections. This is a very critical part of the utilities annual planning work that we can be accountable and fully transparent to our customers, you know, who pay our rates. So we're gonna walk through several things this morning. I know there's a flurry of activities going on, but feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. But we'll talk about the formal process. Is followed the similar calendar and timeline of a very important critical step of reaching out to departments and hearing from them directly in our budget meetings to understand the cost drivers. And we had excellent participation. We have our new HR director sat in several days. All of these meetings, our procurement director, all the finance, and of course the budget team. So that's very critical in us building relationships and working with the teams to understand the spending that needs to occur to move the strategic plan forward and continue to progress. So here we are, early December, looking at our draft fiscal 24 budget, and we'll ultimately ask for approval before the end of the year as is required. Next slide is sort of getting to the end result where we present a balanced budget, meaning expenses that will allow us to meet our debt obligations. And that's the critical aspect of our budgeting requirement. As we know, there are no rate increases for the fourth consecutive year. And so top line revenue growth is pretty nominal, say about 3% based on volumes and revenue recovery efforts. Also the smart metering project is getting it some account setups, you know, in the manual processes just haven't been corrected. So we do expect a little bit of a volume increase to produce just nominal revenue growth. And very importantly, as we've been discussing, the consecutive quarters of collecting, doing normal disconnects for customers that aren't paying is benefited our collection ratios, so we're able to estimate a lower amount of provision for bad debt, which is helping build up cash reserves and allowing us to plan better just with that consistency. So we look forward to doing that again this coming fiscal 24.
Ray, what has inflation been during cumulative inflation rate over that 4-year period? Do we know? We don't have any increases.
Yeah, the CPI number was very high. I don't know the cumulative number. I think last year was like 6 or 7%. So you're getting probably close to double digit if you think about 2020 through 2024. So it's a good point. The inflationary pressure is just being passed on to us, and we'll talk about that in several different areas. So at some point the rate has to go up, the rates have to go up, or we'll start sort of falling behind further.
And what is the assumed uncollectible estimate for the year?
It's about 3 to 4%, so it's come down a lot. We're going to talk about that in the slide coming up.
Thank you.
So main point here is we had to be clear with the departments. All the spending requests could not be met, so we received additional requests. We asked departments, GSO is obviously a big part of this. Went back and made reductions. The CAO office as well. So just sort of a normal process of the rounds of budgeting that go into the numbers. Next couple slides, I want to spend a few minutes to talk about where we're coming out of 2023, how the results are comparing. We've talked about this in the F&A committee because this is a very important aspect of the proper planning, is it considering our recent historical results and what that means for stability and reserves on hand. So the 90-day cash requirement has been 225, 257 for water and sewer as of the end of October, and the audited number was 173 and 220. So again, cushion there has existed there because that's by law is at 90. We target around 125, so we come in higher. Debt service coverage has been over 2 at the end of the year audited, and then throughout this year we've been also over 2 based on we're lower than our budgeted expenses. And so we did this table. I wanted to show when we think about where we are in October for 23 O&M, and then we put in a estimate, a healthy estimate really for November, we're done now, and then December. On our cash O&M, which is this middle number, we're at about 227 million. Our budgeted was 236. So that's roughly 9.2 million favorable variance, and that ties into the commodity. The actual gas cost has been lower. Dry conditions, we have some lower personnel costs because we estimate hiring at a certain pace. If we don't do that hiring, then we get favorable expense variances on personnel. So all those things go into say we, are factoring that in as we look forward. How flexible can we be if we have true needs in 24 that are presented by departments, given where we are here at this point. So it just provides a good snapshot of how things are looking as we continue to evaluate what our cash needs are.
Great, I had a question with that slide. As you are aware, we projected that we'd have a we projected we'd have a $3.5 million surplus for PAYGO and drainage. This lumps all those together, right? Even though we wouldn't be able to use a drainage excess to pay for water, right?
Yeah, it takes water, sewer, drainage together. So the PAYGO capital number, as you move throughout the year, it varies each month, but it's really an assessment of how things have unfolded through the year. How are we able to flex a little bit on the PAYGO, spend a little more for a smaller project? So that's what we've done this year, and we'll talk about.
Yeah, but my point, I guess, is seeing it by department would be useful because our drainage PAYGO is very small, and if you look at this, say, well, there's $50 million. That's not what it is. It's $3.5 million for drainage.
Yeah, we have to keep
Particularly given last
the
weekend.
3 systems separate: water, sewer, drainage. That's right.
So a column with the separator or something like that would be useful, I think.
Okay. So on the next slide, we've laid out, based on our discussion of the last meeting, this is on the capital appropriation side. So what we're looking at here on the left side is our budgeted, appropriated, our budget for appropriations for funded projects was $440 million, 23 budget. And what we wanted to show here is what we've actually done in appropriations through November and with an estimate for December. So we put it just into the 3 major project categories, which are the power complex, the smart metering, and then we separated joint projects. It's a little different, and then we have basically everything else. So what this is showing with our major projects, we're on track with our deadlines. We've appropriated $77 million. We're continuing to focus on the sewer consent decree deadline, getting all those contracts out, getting the smart metering program activated this year. So good progress to report there. On the joint projects, it's complicated in the sense that we're not fully in control of when contracts get put out. So we know DPW has slowed down in the last 2 years, so that the extent that external factors influence joint work, things kind of get moved to the right. There's a financing plan on the sewer side with WIFIA, but on the water, there's some limitations with the FEMA capped grant. So the discussions and meetings with FEMA on that are sort of going to continue into 24 as you look for funding sources for water. Corps of Engineers, a similar concept. The external party is running the jobs, letting contracts. We estimate a certain amount for funding requests. To the extent those aren't needed, it's moved off to the right. So just several factors with joint projects that are causing less appropriations than we may have earlier estimated. And then finally, in our other category, which is the $82 million, we've appropriated $33 million. This time last year in 23, there was a large beginnings of an application for SRF for the wastewater treatment plant, about $39 million, which we've now seen that come into fruition here in 23 with a loan commitment. So looking back, we put it in a little early last year for the entire wastewater state revolving fund. So
That'll carry over into 24.
yeah, so it's a process where we need to tweak and make improvements so that when we look at an SRF that is going to have a design phase, is going to have a application, environmental reviews, going forward we will more likely wait to put those into the capital budget a little bit later to try and get the timing more aligned, and that'll narrow these numbers, the differences. On PAYGO, these are like projects that can be $200,000 up to a few million. We were able to utilize with the, GSO's works this. They are prioritizing what needs to be done based on emergency responses, emergency capital repairs. But $33 million is put to work, so that's within our control. Very, very good use of capital, and those went to, well, for one, the SELA payback, the networks construction, capital contracts, all those got executed with PAYGO funding, and we added to our monitoring of that each month. And Kevin Garrison is here. The budget team put out a report each month. We show what we appropriated for PAYGO. We talk with GSO's office, with Caitlin, continually revisiting that list. So we have some good things that went into PAYGO executed. There's some other aspects with some IT projects that were initially anticipated in 23 that because of the planning and procurement steps we are now going to see in 24, and that's the financial system project and the asset management system. So some logical reasons that things move to the right for planning purposes. We just need to tweak as we move forward, take those into consideration, not be too aggressive, because we are understanding, the questions comes up, and the rating agencies also ask us about delivering the capital projects that we put on the list. So we'll take those into consideration, or we have for the fiscal 24.
And just for those unfamiliar with the nomenclature, move to the right means delay until another year, right?
Yes.
That was a Carroll term, right? Move
Or
to the right.
some, yeah, some sort of delay.
Yeah.
I think at one point I'd like to just add and emphasize that, because I think somebody asked me this question, had the circumstances been different, more favorable, we would have had the capacity to perform and produce or execute higher capital projects. So most of the delays are beyond our control.
Those things that are out of our control or we're delaying us, yeah.
But we had the capacity to get close to the budget amount had the circumstances been more favorable. Just wanted, I think you may have asked.
I did, yeah.
So we'll talk more about capital, but that's just kind of give us a sense of how 23 is shaped up. So what's important is we consider this recent experience into our this year's budget process, and we continue to look at where we can be flexible, where we need to be prudent and conservative, and where we can better communicate, have a better communication of the plan and what our priorities are, and follow through on those. This is a continuation of the strategic plan. These were words that resonated, continue to resonate to make sure that each of these are met, that we can drive our priorities through being strategic, proactive, efficient, and accountable. So this was something we spoke to the managers about in the budget meetings, and again, it's hard to believe this would be '24 will be the middle year of our 5-year strategic plan, so there's going to be lots of important activities going on to make the progress that we need to make. Next slide is just showing a bar graph of the top line revenue. As we mentioned, is this nominal growth with some volume recovery and things that we expect to produce a little bit more revenue, but nothing very very large. So we'll continue to make our case with the city council and the need for rate increases.
Greg, can you go back to that a minute? I mean, we may have this coming up. I can't remember where it is. If this is the actual or the estimate for 2023 and the budget for 24, that is without taking into account people that don't pay, right? That's just what the revenue should be?
Build revenue, yeah, top line.
Top line, okay. So what are the equivalent numbers then for?
Liabilities. That.
For, no, what I'm asking for, what are we actually expecting?
3% off of those numbers,
Just
right?
3%.
Right.
Okay.
For this year's collected.
Dexter says no.
Huh?
Look at Dexter back there, shaking his head.
3%? What was it this year?
What are you asking?
I'm asking what is the actual dollar amount we expect to collect when
After reserving for non,
yeah.
or after not receiving.
But what actually goes to operations versus,
What we should be collecting.
goes up in the air because it's not collected?
Yeah, that's where our estimate for provision for doubtful accounts is run in actual cash is 3 to 5% throughout the year. If we look at what we budgeted for the 23 budget, we had a higher, closer to 8 or 9%, but we've seen better performance. So as we get to the fourth quarter, we've stopped recording as much estimated expense.
Okay.
And then we have to, for the audit, for 23, we'll have to reassess our estimate and provide a best estimate. But this 5%, 3 to 5% is sort of where it's looking like it's coming in. But that's it's just an estimate of.
Okay.
So our next slide is our total expenses that we are showing here compared to the as modified budget. So key number here is the middle, the 250,601,000 is our cash O&M. So this is after we got additional requests from departments. We asked the GSO to reduce some. We asked the CAO to reduce some. But this is where we sort of ended up, 250 million. So you see for water and sewer, it's about approximately 7 million higher than what our budgeted for 23 was. And the reason for this is primarily in the direct costs, personnel costs, across the board, 2.5% salary increases will go in January. Another large increase under the CAO is the general insurance. So our insurance premiums for property and casualty portfolio are going up. It's similar to what you see in the housing market, with fewer insurers, higher loss ratios for them. They're increasing their premium. More people are trying to get insurance. So all those factors are just driving up their insurance costs. So we included those additional expenses here. The wastewater operating treatment plant contract has a standard inflationary increase that they get added to that contract this year. It's about $2 million. Chemical cost increase, commodity-based price. We have to continue to buy chemicals, to treat water. So those factor in. You'll notice on drainage, we actually are a little bit lower on that one. That's because of the pressure to maintain a minimum level of pay-go to pay the CELA debt obligation and just minimal work we there. But for water and sewer, as we hear from the departments what the cost justifications are, again, sticking to the strategic goals, we felt these were a prudent and still conservative amount of expenses. and we will still meet our debt covenants. So we're presenting these to the committee, to move forward so we can, again, make progress in '24, have a little bit more spending flexibility and achieve some of these goals of improving our services. The debt service goes up a bit in '24. You see that 11%, it's 56 million. So we're getting into some of the payback and the DEQ loan and loans for the consent decree work. The WIFIA loans will begin paying some back, but those loans are based on construction draws, so the debt becomes a debt once we submit invoices and actually borrow the money. There's a little bit of estimation where we don't know exactly what the payback is until we start making the draws, but that'll start happening in '24.
Sorry.
So we'll get into the next slide is where we put both the revenue and expenses together in a chart. So it's just, again,
Yes.
Yeah, we're all.
I think I'm gonna
allergic
explode
here.
over here.
If not allergic to your presentation.
No.
Environment.
So again, the minimal top line increases. And then on line 4, this is the primary line where our managers, the cash O&M, can influence and assist us in protecting funds to spend what we have prudently so that we can preserve money for the CIP, for the capital programs. So that's the $250 million that we were looking at on the previous slide, broken down between water, sewer, and drainage.
The expenses, we're what, 343 people under what our budgeted size is? How does that factor, how do you factor?
We make an estimate for
Vacancies,
vacancies
yeah.
for the time during the year that they'll most likely get hired. Either if it was a planned hire that was already in the pipeline, then their position would be 100% of their personnel costs. If it's later in the year, it might be 25%, or if it's possibly not going to happen till very late in the year, it could be a lower percentage. So that's how the costs are.
So you
estimated.
face that in, unexpected hiring?
Yes.
Yeah.
And wanted to highlight here, just to, budgeting is important for some conservatism so we can protect our bond covenants as we've been doing. We have some additional, the fair share revenue has been coming through. We don't factor that in here, although because it's really intended to be capital projects that we identify and discuss with the IAB, but those numbers are coming into our accounts on a monthly basis, so that's helping our cash reserves. Interest income, this line 11, this number has been higher throughout 23 because of higher interest yields, but we'll be spending down those bond proceeds. So just trying to have some conservatism and continue with that trend because we know emergencies happen, things change daily, and it's really just working within our parameters so we're not overextended, but it's a balancing act.
When you said working with IDVs, what does IDV stand for?
The Infrastructure Advisory Board is the entity that oversees the fair share.
Oh, okay, got it, okay.
They actually see to it that we spend the money on what we said we were gonna spend it on.
Right.
They don't have authority to withhold money.
No.
Yeah. So next slide is just the expenses broken down by division and water, sewer, drainage. The key point here is the operation of the general superintendent is 44%. The lion's share of the budget, total of $408 million, as you would expect, and then followed by chief administrative officer is about 19%. And then
I have a question for the previous slide. So and I'm looking at special counsel and it's divided by system. Is that a budget for disputes and legal?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there any budget for lobbying and accessing additional federal grants or budget?
That's not in my budget. That would be
That would
in
be
the,
special
in
counsel.
executive director's
Okay.
budget and/or with communications. We do have a position, that is, we call the chief of staff, and that would be handled via that person, once that person is hired.
But is there any budget for external counsel?
Yes, outside counsel, which actually handles, our larger lawsuits. So yes, we do have outside counsel.
Okay, but for handling disputes, but not for
Litigation disputes, not necessarily for
accessing additional.
lobbying.
Okay.
So that the lobbying that we have through, when we use outside counsel,
City, right?
It's a city representative.
it is a, I guess it's a group of us, agencies, including the city, the board, the airport, that share in our federal lobbyist, as well as our local lobbyist. But this year, we did get our own lobbyist, and we actually paid that through our chief of staff's budget.
Okay. So,
So I think to answer your question, we don't have like a grant writer position that is gonna split off based on existing talent, and people just do that. Caitlin leads some of those, and so do a few others. When we look after opportunities, whether it's RSRF or WFIA or anything else. As far as lobbying, we do have a federal lobbyist, and we have a lobbyist for the state level.
but they're
and
assigned
limited.
by the city and share two different systems.
Yeah, we have a direct line of communication with them, and they have a like appointed tasks that we dictate or we ask for, and then they help us out with that.
Okay, and historically, it's been the chief of staff that's been in charge of actually putting, so say that the lobbyists say there's an opportunity in X and Y, then the chief of staff would actually put it, package it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and what we don't have a sizable budget is more like public relations, marketing, and that arena is still,
For what'd you say, those
in
things?
terms of public relations, advocacy, campaign for certain projects or initiatives. So that's the one area that,
That's sort of handled through our comms department, communications department. But to have a special person geared specifically towards lobbying, no.
And would there be a space, if there's an appetite, by this board to have somebody dedicated for this? Or if not somebody, a larger effort,
Mhm.
how do we go about in suggesting a change in the budget to actually making this happen?
today, I mean, can
Today,
you tell
this
us
is-
what you'd like to, I mean, budget represents or reflects priorities, right? And then we have way too many priorities than what we can budget for. So if marketing, outreach is important, and it is, but it will have to maybe edge something else off, is what do you want us to do and how much money?
Well,
we wanna
it
stop?
seems to me that, and this, I don't know if it's the right committee for this, but maybe we could get Alejandro to chair an ad hoc committee to study this and give you give us a recommendation. I don't know how today we're gonna come up with a number.
Yeah.
But if we can reserve some money for a future, I don't know how that works.
And just to portray what I'm thinking is, obviously, we have many needs, right? And I don't think even our budget is reflecting really, like, if we compare it to the capital needs that we have, I mean, we're underfunded.
Yes.
So how do we go about creating a strategy to access federal money or other sources of capital to help us effectively move through that, funding all of our capital needs? If not, it's going to be an ever, loop of we're presenting a budget, but next year we're going to have an emergency, and it's going to turn out that we can't solve that emergency because we just don't have the budget to solve our needs.
Right.
So anyways, I'm thinking about how do we go about creating that structure here to be able to find opportunities.
Yeah.
Some of it through business services that Caitlin oversees, but it is, like you said, hodgepodge. It's in various different departments.
Yeah. So, and just to be clear, marketing and communication is definitely important, but I'm thinking more of a business developer, and,
Grant writing is
Yes.
what we,
Yeah.
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 definitely.
And
So, Oh, go ahead, Janet, sorry.
I also think we need to make sure we've got adequate funding for lobbying, not just at the federal level,
Yes,
but at the state level.
yes.
Well, this is
And that's part of what I'm
part of what you're talking
suggesting.
about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how do we dedicate resources
Yeah,
and somebody
I
that's,
think-
yeah.
I think this is critical.
And we have to make sure we work within whatever the city constraints are on that.
Absolutely.
So how about you chair that, do a little study group and figure out.
I accept. No choice.
So how can we, is it possible to reserve some money?
Yeah, we'll go back to the drawing board and allocate some, I mean, a certain a placeholder amount. We are working on a couple things that are too early to share, but we think will meet some of what you're asking for. But it may not be enough, so we'll just have to boost it up.
Well, let's start with Alejandro working, should get a group together.
And some of that can go through governance, because if you're talking about the lobbying efforts, that would be
Yeah.
through that legislation.
Governance?
Yes.
Yeah, but let's just do a separate ad hoc committee on this thing right now that Alejandro can run.
I do feel compelled to acknowledge the organic efforts that our staff
Oh, yes. that-
done.
no.
They brought, I think, 180 million in 23, almost 480 between 21 and 22. So we're doing it like everybody's going above and beyond, and just obviously targeting
No,
funding.
which is
and-
commended.
But we
and
need
very
a more
impressive.
concentrated unit that does just that. Yes.
Yeah, and just, not to go too long into this, but the chief of staff, there's so many things that happen on a day-to-day basis that person will need to take care of, that I don't know how that person will be able to focus on finding sources of revenue.
Yeah, we hear you.
Staff's done a great job of raising money. There's no doubt about it. We've gotten money from the state where nobody else asked, and it's available to other people. We know that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
But there's more to get, if I
Yeah.
think to your point.
and lobbying, yeah.
And this is just not for Sewage and Water Board. I think in general in Louisiana, we leave a lot of money on the table because nobody asked for it. So how do we go about identifying those opportunities and actually pursuing them?
And we look forward to that answer from your committee.
Thank you for accepting.
Yeah,
That's good.
I think that's great feedback. Thank you.
Right?
Well, no, that's excellent feedback.
Okay.
That's really driving the sort of top line resources that we have available. So our next slide is a comparison of, we're proposing for the 2024 budget, operating budget compared to 2023, and walk through a little further what we started discussing. So the first three lines are the primary $14 million driver that's going up because of the costs that we have to pass on, absorb. You'll see the overhead type charges are really about 500,000 higher. So the bulk of the cash O&M increase is really embedded into these functions that are servicing our customers and providing services out in the field with whatever cost that are things we acquire or our operator charges us. So that's where the increase is concentrated. Here below, a line below operating, are more of our estimation type of numbers that we do an estimate based on last year's audited, like for depreciation, and add a 10% additional amount for new projects that are placed in service. For our pension plan and OPEB plan, we take last year's audited, but ultimately those will be determined through actuarial evaluation.
Yeah, why is depreciation down? Are those just end-of-life stuff that's fully depreciated?
No, I think in looking at the 2023 estimate, we're a little too high. Probably it's not really tied to a retirement of assets, but
That's,
I think
okay.
we just got overestimated when we did a calculation last year.
And the 37% reduction, does that translate to 3% of the budget, top line?
Yeah, that's so let's talk about that. So going back to the 23 provision for doubtful accounts is 17.9 million, was at this 8 to 9%, whereas the 10.775 so that's water and sewer, approximately 5 million each, should come to the much lower 3 to 4%. I haven't calculated the exact numbers that comes out. Should be able to do that math. It's at 10.7 million compared to,
That'd be about right? It's a, think it is.
less than 5%.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. That shows where the collections efforts, the consistent quarters of doing normal service disconnects as a last result produces that regular payment stream that we can plan for better. Talked about debt service has gone up, and then that leaves PAYGO, which is the residual of everything, still around this 42, 43 million. So not a lot of changes there. So our primary limitation in this whole equation is the lines 9 and 10 to meet debt service and have PAYGO. So in order to increase or have a greater commitment to a capital improvement plan, we have to be able to issue more debt or have more debt service capacity, or we have to have leftover PAYGO. That's just not the case with our current rate. So we'll continue to make the case for rate increases and pursue other revenue sources. The bottom line, the 451 million total operating budget, is basically flat to fiscal 23. So that's all the uses of the funds.
Well, a flat budget in inflationary times is an achievement. It's
Challenging. This next slide is just walking through the mechanics of the PAYGO residual calculation. If we collect the revenue, we pay all the bills, pay the debt service, the remaining cash surplus is the PAYGO number. And this is, as I mentioned, we've each year in the last two or 3 years, so I've been working to really monitor this on a monthly basis, because we, at the beginning of 24, we can't go out and, issue contracts and spend all of that. In the first quarter, we have to see how the year unfolds. We have to work with the GSO's office. We have to understand their priorities as the things change quickly overnight with emergencies. There's several emergency capital repairs that occurred in fiscal 23. We don't know what will happen. Hope for the best, but it's again very much a juggling act. We have to work closely with the GSO to move forward. Next slide is the personnel slide. This has recommended positions 1588. It's down slightly, about 15 positions. I just want to highlight the general superintendent is 69% of those positions at 1,068, followed by the chief customer service. Customer service has about 302 positions. So we're very excited to work with the new HR leadership and getting more hires in, getting more talent to fill positions and work with us as we make progress in the strategic plan. And also the people plan we know is critical. So just very, very excited to have the new talent and the HR leadership to help us ultimately get more of the positions filled.
Great. Would it be easy enough to add a column of what the actual, either vacancies or filled, whichever one, or current vacancies, so we can see?
Yeah, we can add that column for, by division, we'll show the.
Because we're 343 down right now, which is significant.
Yep, that's right. We'll add that column filled. Next slide is the debt service calculation that we've been describing or talking about as a key metric to ensure that we can shoulder this level of expenses. So the net revenues available for service is a line 2 from the top. So that's what we have to pay our senior debt service with. This gets us 1.9, 1.98 for sewer, and drainage, I need to correct that. That's actually 3.03. Drainage has a little bit different calculation with the 1.33 requirement of our taxes collected under that 9 mil that has the approximately $45 million loan that was used for the West Power Complex, or is being used for West Power Complex. But these spending levels and this collection, this projected cash flows will allow us to maintain the cash on hand at above the 90 required level. So we feel comfortable with this level of expenses for fiscal '24. On the next slide, I'd like to run through next couple slides our capital program, and I think, you know, for me, the goals fiscal '24 is to improve the financial communications on CIP. We've had lots of discussions about deferring CIP. We talk about the pay-go limitations. So we've been working this past year with the committee on the way we group and label the different categories, so it's a little more digestible to understand, because we have a lot of individual capital programs that roll up and mean something for different aspects of really primarily the GSO's function, which is to get in and replace, upgrade all this aged infrastructure. So just trying to make it more meaningful, understandable, and understand or know where the drivers, where we can be a little more proactive rather than reactionary. So that's sort of some high-level goals. We still have the backlog, so projects that were deferred appear in this list again for '24. And then with respect to the WIFIA financing, we've taken contracts that were originally in joint work, separated those out into Sewage and Water Board contracts. The GSO's office has done that, and that's because of the need to meet those deadlines, and that'll allow us to control our own destiny in that sense. But there's the WIFIA loan we're now about to start taking draws on, because we spent down our bond proceeds. But there is a finite draw period to 2026. So over these next couple of years, we have to draw the loan, or the 275 million will be reduced. Whatever we draw by the end of that draw period is what the loan would be. So we want to maximize that spending availability that's there.
Do we depend on the city for the timing of this, so that we're at risk because of their actions?
Yes.
Okay.
In some instances, and we're gonna project that and see if we can separate that and go independent, as to not to sacrifice any money.
I'm sure I ought to know, but what does non-consent decree have to do with it? It says non-consent decree related.
Yeah, so there's two. There's the 164 WIFIA projects included, both projects that were required by the consent decree, and then other projects that are just sewer rehabilitation that are not part of the consent decree.
Mm-hmm. And those are normal sewer line replacements. We participate in conjunction with DPW on their capital improvement projects, most of them.
But are non-consent decree projects, they're specifically in our control, whereas consent decree requires city.
The consent decree is a combination of both. You just want to clarify that, the consent decree, we have city projects, and we also have internally lately in 2023 and in 2024, where we had consent decree projects in the city's DPW, JR projects, because of our tight timeline, if they hadn't gone out to bid, we've actually extracted that sewer work out of the city's projects. We've put it back into our own sewage and water board projects that we've done in the past. So, and again, Q3 of this year, especially Q4, we've actually ramped up our consent decree projects for the sewage and water board to stay online of meeting that consent decree deadline, which is in 2025.
Are these network issues, or are they plant issues?
No, the consent decree are all within our network system, our sewer collection system.
So how do we do that if they're not coordinated with the city's timing?
Well, one we take a look at where the city is reconstructing a roadway, we put those in.
Okay.
That's something we do. If the city is going to come down the line, what we've done in the past, that they'll say 2 years from now, we're gonna reconstruct that roadway. We have to move ahead with our consent decree with the timeline, and then we come back when we do the paving, we put that strip, we put temp asphalt. So we have a design section for that, for temp asphalt, and then when they come back, then the sewer's already done, then you can do the water or drain, do the street, and you keep going. So it's that additional temp asphalt we have to do in order to, stay on our timeline with the consent decree.
Okay.
Which is kind of what we didn't want to do.
We,
We want to do it all one time. I mean, that was the whole
Yes,
idea of JIRR, right?
But there's two timelines,
No, I
two
get it.
drivers, right?
That
So
is correct.
the earlier one dictates.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So we're fulfilling our part of it.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
We're fulfilling our part of it on
But
time.
we have to,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the,
Okay.
have to meet that EPA consent decree timeline no matter what.
Yeah, so I think we talked about this, last bullet point is we were, appreciate your feedback earlier that this function of finding other financing and other resources is a very critical part of this. And understanding that, some things are loans, but they have to be repaid. So they may be favorable, but we have to have debt capacity to make repayments.
I thought a list of those sources and amounts would be useful for the committee to know, not today, but not necessarily in this report, but I'd like to see it.
Yeah, we have that list. So on the next slide, we'll talk about our grouping. So our mega projects are sort of the power complex, the flagship thing. The lead and copper rule will be new. We have an application in, as we talked about, for the LDH. SELA will continue. We have a certain amount. Drainage has to commit funds to that for the continuation of Algiers and the payback for Uptown. We have the water line replacement program with JIR. We talked about that. That's it's ongoing. There's been a slowdown by DPW recently to respond to market conditions where the bids were coming back so much higher. There's also a funding issue with the capped grant that we'll have to work with the city on. There's currently a smaller number of projects they've agreed to front funding for us to allow it to go forward. But at some point, FEMA capped the grant, so we have to go back and work with FEMA to understand if the city will be able to transfer their grant money to us in some way for that to ultimately get done, because there's some waves 3 and 4, I guess, still to remain on the JIRR. For lines, the sewer line, two sewer lines, E and S, are what we were just talking about earlier. We broke those out to sort of more clearly show or depict the difference between E, which is a consent decree related, versus regular sewer line replacement program. So each of those are under sewer, 188 million, 94 million. We have the $275 million financing set up, so we'll expect to move forward those projects. Some of those are getting in this quarter, Q4 23. We have more contracts, so meeting that sewer consent decree deadline has been primary focus, and we've made a lot of progress getting out more contracts in the last 6 months or so. So that the construction period will have all of 24, and then October 25 can meet the deadline. But we just want to highlight, with the non-consent decree, which is line S, there's a little less certainty about getting those contracts out or timing. So when we see that things move to the right, it's a little bit expected, if that makes sense, because we're not in direct control. As Ron mentioned, we're sort of in the process of taking more control on that, and we will spend that funding because it is available at a very low interest rate. So that's a sort of a fluid type of situation, and 164 projects is very large, so it's a large program.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Line F, water hazard mitigation program is wrapping up with the completion of the high lift Panola pumping stations scheduled in 24. So a very significant, impactful project over the years to the system. It's pretty awesome to think about how much has gone into the ground and shows up when you're over at the Carrollton Water Plant. And I will mention both the mega and the second category, refurbish and replacement, are funded, fully funded, which is, you'll see on the next slide. But as we move down and get into the second category, these are things we've done with the state, or plan to do with the state revolving funds, particularly the wastewater treatment plant. We have the loan commitment in hand now. We have a phase one set of work that Veolia is going to work with us on the design to get those contracts let and out in process. It's like a 2-year process for phase one to get that accomplished. But again, rather than taking last year's approach where we're showing the entire 39 million, we've broken it down to sort of a phase one, phase two, just for 24, which makes a little more sense to accomplish here in fiscal 24. Our other refurbish and replacement projects are funded through a combination of PAYGO, the Fair Share. We've talked about the Infrastructure Advisory Board's interest in the Sycamore Filter Gallery. We'll be asking them to do a continuation of projects to rehabilitate those filter galleries. We'll continue that under the water system facilities replacements. Drainage power facilities, again, is where we're pretty limited with about 3 million allocated for those miscellaneous projects under drainage. For repair, this is a group of estimates where we get into really just having to rely on PAYGO. There's some ability or some application with FEMA for some hazard mitigation related grants for after Ida and all the issues were experienced at the wastewater treatment plant, that they would support us with a hazard mitigation grant. So we've included those in the wastewater lines. And then finally, on the technology, we do have several software projects talking about that are really actually here. They were more in the planning phases. To the financial system would be implementations. There's a couple $1 million there. Asset management, we have put out requests for bids to do the RFP. So we have those back in hand. So there's going to be some spending on the IT front, and that's again supported by PAYGO. But very critical to our strategic plan to execute on those. We continue to have an allotment for vehicle and equipment, so the support services group runs those, and we're replenishing to have efficient equipment to get things done more effectively in the field.
And that software and technology, I mean, when we say something's coming from PAYGO, it's prioritized within PAYGO because we're not 100% sure what PAYGO is going to be until the year unfolds, right?
Yeah, it's prioritized.
Is that, and I know a little bit of it, but is part of that smart meter and integration into our billing system, or?
Well, that would be up in the smart metering line at the top with the mega projects.
I wasn't paying enough attention. I'm punished.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so just asterisk what we talked about earlier with the sewer line replacement program, and our objective here as we look at the next slide is to bring these numbers more in alignment, so there's not a larger amount of unfunded PAYGO projects that really are not going to be in the work plan for fiscal 24. So when I compare the numbers, this is 476 million of funding sources, and the previous slide had a 504, taking out the capitalized overhead that's done for accounting purposes, but that will get funded. So when I compare the 484 million to what we have identified, we're just showing about an $8 million unfunded. So that's again, things are going to change because priorities will change, emergencies could happen, and we'll reassess, and then we'll continue to compare to PAYGO, we'll look at our cash reserves, see how the year unfolds, and then we'll have a sort of a more realistic list of pay-go projects. GSO will provide their input to what needs to be done. There's so many unknowns, but at this level, I think it's a good summary to say we can break things down to repair. That's more the emergency type basis. Refurbishment, replacements. You have a proactive, planned approach, but you still have to react to your emergencies first each time. So I think, I don't know, Ron, anything you want to add from a emergency reactionary standpoint? But this is a giant puzzle to shuffle all this.
No, I think we agree. Paraphrase is pretty good. Again, it's dry, no hurricanes, but outside of hurricanes, aging equipment breaks.
Yeah.
And when that aging equipment breaks, you have to get on it and keep it operational. So, I mean, that's really the key thing of it. We are dealing, as Executive Director said in the past, with an aging infrastructure. And until you replace that aging infrastructure, you still have to put resources in there to keep us functioning.
Robin, since you're here, would you mind giving us a quick update on T5 and T4, or T4 and 5, whichever way you want to say it?
Yes, I can. If we're done with the budget, I can do that.
Oh,
Well, I have a question for the budget. You mentioned $8 million unfunded. What is that tied up to?
Those are additional repair projects that could be done if the funding was there, or some replacement type projects.
Okay, so that ties nicely into the question, what's going on with the turbine? Okay.
But yeah, just to conclude on this slide, we listed the multiple sources, which highlights the point about the need for multiple different resources. Power complex, we're up to like eight funding sources. Very important project, as we know, with the 275 million. We'll be using every single one of those to get to this phase 1 deadline. Smart metering, similar. We're now up to about 4 funding sources, and we're going to be, fiscal 24. We'll see a lot of that meters go in, and it's going to be impactful. So we're happy that we've been able to put aside these funds and have that funded so we can move forward. But that's where we are with the capital, and I guess
under refurb and replace, I guess it's the topic in this presentation. We might talk about T4 and 5 for a minute.
Yeah, a quick thing on T4 and T5, as everyone's aware, during the height of the storm, heavy rains we had Saturday, December 1st or 2nd, I think. The dates mix up a little bit. T4 tripped offline. Part of what I've indicated on even the 2 news conferences, T4 tripped offline. It was the thrust bearing that did the trip. The thrust bearing did the job it's supposed to do. An abnormality came, it tripped offline. What we've discovered thus far from the disassembly, the contractor actually mobilized on site Sunday to begin disassembling and investigating T4. We had a mechanical issue, a potential mechanical issue with our governor control valve. So again, the governor control valve is a piece of equipment that utilizes the flow of steam to the turbine itself based upon the power load of the turbine itself. So again, we are taking a look at that. Why that happened, but again, we are in the process of changing out the thrust bearing. Definitely doing that. The contractor's expediting that, and hopefully by the end of this week, first of next week, we can get a pretty definitive timeline on for T4 coming back online. Looking at the data over the weekend, some positive news on the data is that the turbine did not overspeed, which is a good thing, and maintained its constant RPM of the turbine itself. So the inspection we've done, going in, taking a look at the rotor, some of the other major components, no damage to that. But we have to investigate, take a look at what caused the governor control valve to malfunction. And again, as what we said earlier, we did rebuild that turbine. But when we say we rebuilt the turbine post-Katrina, you're pretty much using the shell of components of the existing rebuilding. And so we're going to take a look at that. So that's where we are at this point for T4. Moving into T5. T5 had an issue.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
on
yes,
T4 first? There was an article over the weekend, one of the news sources, that said that we had rebuilt it when it should have been replaced. I assumed, again, that is because there wasn't any funding to do anything other.
I'm going to answer it this way. I wasn't involved during that, but as the interim general superintendent and the general superintendent at that time, who was in heaven, Mrs. Sullivan, when you have a catastrophic event like Hurricane Katrina, and you're trying to get your system back up online,
Yeah.
it's easy to say, yes, you need to put money into replacing that. Yes, that's good. And as people see now with our power complex, we are going in that direction
Right.
with the power complex. But it takes time, and it takes 2-3 years to build that power complex. So you cannot just leave that turbine there. From the Sewage and Water Board perspective, again, to our stakeholders, I say our stakeholders, to our customers, we have to stay operational. So you have no choice but to find a way to rebuild that turbine as quickly, as efficiently as possible to get it back online. So,
Very good point. Thank you.
and so that's really when we've indicated in the past, this transition is sort of like changing an airplane engine while it's flying. And that's where we are in this transition now. So I just want to answer that because we get quite a few questions on why you didn't put the money into replacement. But if there was another turbine that you can still use and do replace, you have to remain operational. You have to keep the city dry no matter what, and that's what we're doing right now. Even as this West Power Complex, which is really our long-term solution of where we need to go to address the aging infrastructure, what we have to do. So that's with that question. Relative to T5 with the auxiliary oil pump as well as the gear oil pump, that was again aging infrastructure. It was just basically wear and tear when that pump went out. So what's the significance of this is that the age of this oil pump and the gear pump, you just can't go to a manufacturer and say, let me pull one off the shelf, as you can potentially do for a newer turbine, because they don't manufacture and make those parts anymore. So I got to take my hat off to our operations staff. What they did was found old patterns, old designs. We even had in our warehouse a spare pump that we thought was operational somewhat, but it was somewhat in a tore condition. So we salvaged parts from there, re-engineered those parts. We built new parts associated with that. That pump is back. A day ago, we completed that, and we're in our last phase of doing an oil flush, which is going to take us through the weekend of Monday or Tuesday of next week to get that oil flush done. Once that's done, then we'll put that pump in, test that machine, and what we've indicated is to get T5 on by, that was 10 business days of last weekend, so by December 15th, that's our deadline. We're trying to get T5 back online because we need that power redundancy.
And what are we short on the power complex funding right now?
We're hoping to gain the $29 million that are in capital outlay that will help us get the project commissioned between the substation and our pieces with the frequency changers, utility rack, central control. All that would be ready in summer of 2025. Now, we can use more money to continue improving it, making it better, more resilient, but for now, with the 29 million that we're hoping to get in 24, we should be able to deliver the project. We'll be able to utilize the substation as designed.
That's a state money?
That's
a
state
priority
money,
5,
yes,
you want
yes.
to go to priority 1?
Yeah.
It's already in queue?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So it's a matter of legislators, or
Okay.
the governor's office putting it in the budget, and the
Yeah.
legislators voting for it.
I had one more question, sorry, but one of the articles I read talked about diminished power in T4, and our response was that we used conservative numbers, that we should have had basically enough power with what we have. Is that, would you restate that in a way that is understandable?
Yes, again, with T4, the question was asked with the diminished capacity of T4. It wasn't the turbine itself, that equipment itself, but it was the, I would say, the auxiliary component associated with our fans in the boiler rooms. What we've been doing since this summer, this is in conjunction with the West Power Complex, is not only we are building a new West Power Complex, that's good and dandy, we ship the power over, but we also have to do some work within our existing power complex itself in order to integrate both these systems together. And part of that was upgrading the boiler room fans, 3 of the boiler room fans from 25 hertz to 60 hertz. We did 1 boiler room fan at a time, so we can always have the capacity, the potential to produce steam with T4. And this last boiler room fan was such that not only we had to rewind the motor, but we also had to do additional work associated with some of the bearings. So the article, yes, what we indicated where the T4 was half the capacity, that was an estimate based upon a conservative estimate that it would get to 10 megawatts. But looking at the data from Sunday, from the steam data that was produced, potentially we could have gone to 12 to 14 megawatts as an estimate. But again, those are some of the decisions and the functions that we have to make, one, in order to stay operational, and then not to push the envelope too much where if you go beyond that, you may lose everything.
I didn't mean it as criticism. I just
No,
want
no,
I just
I'm
want to know if
saying
the article was correct and what the impact of that was.
Yeah, we
Because
gave
a lot
you
of
that
times you read things that aren't.
No, we gave them information.
Just for the benefit of the directors, today we're scheduled to appear in front of Utility Committee at City Hall at 1 o'clock to discuss the event from last Saturday. Just a couple key reminders. Each and every month when we talk about pumping and power here as part of my report, and I know you've heard me say that many times, while we have ample capacity often, the system is fragile, and I've always said the words, this is not where we want to be. That's why we're building the power complex. Whether we had 2 turbines side by side available or 1 or none, the system is fragile. And the likelihood of 2 turbines failing would not be shocking to anybody, right? The one thing that with this past storm that really is being focused on is that what did we expect in terms of the forecast and what actually happened, how we viewed the storm. And we had managed similar storms or even bigger storms with similar capacity last couple months. So to us, it was coming, and we have what we have, and we prepared just like any other storm. It was more intense, and it dumped more rain than anticipated, and we had a failure that, again, unfortunate but not surprising. And one lesson we learned is that we cannot over-communicate, and we should have and could have done a lot more communicating in advance. And we're certainly, hopefully, coming out of this event a bit more aware of that and with a better protocol for not just you, but City Council and the public. But to look back, there's nothing else we could have done other than maybe communicate that we are down a turbine. Which we've done in the past. It's just was not a storm that was not
Well, the forecasts were
anticipated.
wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, the forecasts were low, I know that.
But I mean, that's what happened. So we'll elaborate more at City Hall, and hopefully it will be a productive conversation.
I did think, I don't know if y'all saw, Councilman Green on the news, which was showing the new power complex and said, look, this is a solution to the problem. Did a nice job of highlighting that, as a matter of fact. Okay, we've had is there any,
I think that concludes the budget presentation. We'll work on cleaning up the deck and incorporating some of those comments. Thank you.
any questions?
To be continued.
Pardon me?
To be continued.
Right. Well, yeah. All right, are there any public comments?
No, Chair.
No. We don't actually have to do anything except adjourn at this point, which is very nice. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Motion carries. We're now adjourned. Thanks, everyone.